guys, it is Michelle, and I am here with my September reading wrap-up. I finished 5 things in the month of September, and with as busy as I've been, I am happy with that. The first thing that I finished was The Orinda by Joseph Boyden. I read this as part of the Read Harder Challenge, and the category was read a book about an indigenous people. This follows a man and his family who are part of the Huron-Wendat tribe in Canada when Europeans first come over to North America and start to trade and all that kind of stuff. So I was just sucked into this story. I never knew what was going to happen. I never knew what to think. There's all kinds of politics involved between the tribes, between the different tribes and the different nations that came over from Europe, and all kinds of issues with, introduction of firearms, the introduction of Christianity, the introduction of diseases that, of course, the Native Americans did not have immune systems for. It was just heartbreaking at times. It was very violent at times, but the story was so engrossing and so entertaining, and I just really enjoyed it. It was very violent at times, so I did struggle to get through it quickly because I would have to distance myself from it. When one of the tribes would capture someone deemed an enemy, that was just hard to read at times, but I felt like it was pretty important to know. It was also pretty interesting to see from the viewpoint of a Native American what they thought about the missionaries that Europe sent over and how that played out. I gave it 4 stars, but then a week later went back and it really just stuck with me. And I started wondering how accurate the things that happened between tribes and between nations were. And turns out the author had really done their research. And so without even knowing it, I enjoyed this story, but I was learning all of this history along with it. And so I thought that is worth another star. And so I bumped it up to 5. Did not put it on my favorite shelf, but it definitely deserved 5 stars in my book. It is a 500-page book, though. It's quite a chunk. So, anyway. The next thing that I picked up was Stand Your Ground by Victoria Christopher Murray, and I read this one on my Kindle as well. This is a story about a shooting. An older white man shoots a younger African-American male and is claiming protection by the Stand Your Ground law. The story for the first 60% follows the young man's mother, and in that section of the story, all of the characters were very well-rounded. They had flaws, they had faults. You learn a lot of their backstory. You can kind of see, why things are the way they are, and I cried in several places, and just my heart just went out to the family, and it was very engrossing, very genuine feeling, and I just really enjoyed it. Then it switched to the perspective of the shooter's wife. And from the blurb, I had been led to believe that the 2 women were going to kind of come to see things from each other's side and help each other out. That didn't turn out to be the case at all. I felt like the wife's perspective was very flat. The story was very, I don't know, there just wasn't a lot to it. I didn't feel like it added a whole lot to the story in the end. I felt if it had taken a couple different turns, it would have been very meaningful. But in the end, I felt like this book would have been stronger if it had only been the mother's side and the wife's side hadn't really been included, because she really was a non-factor in the overall story. So I don't even understand why 30% of the book was dedicated to her perspective. It just kind of sat weirdly with me. Because of the whole really strong side of the story and weak side of the story, I probably would have given this 4 stars, but I really had a problem with the way the story ended. It ended with some events that I just can't condone, and really just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and so I ended up bringing my rating down to 3 stars. The writing was fine, but I don't know, just in the end didn't sit well with me, and I did end up giving it 3 stars. All right, I kind of was wanting to read more of the urban contemporary type of a thing, and I wanted to read All American Boys, which is by Jason Reynolds and another author with 2 dual perspectives, but it's not out yet, and so I went instead for Jason Reynolds' YA novel, The Boy in the Black Suit. And this is about a young man in high school. He's a senior, and his mother has just passed away from cancer. His father is starting to drink in his grief, and he feels like he needs to get a job to kind of help support the household, and kind of lives in a little bit of a tough neighborhood, but handles it just fine. Not too much of an issue there. With all that going on, he meets a girl. It's a perfect time to meet a girl, right? When you're grieving your mother and your father's starting to drink, and you've got a new job and you're trying to finish school. But I really thought the author handled all of that very well, and it kind of let the character deal with all of those issues, which is how real life is. And so I really appreciated that he was able to balance all of those out in a story and keep it moving and keep the pacing working very well. I thought that the character showed a lot of maturity overall. I thought that he did a great job of seeking out other opinions from people around him in the neighborhood and people that could support him. And I just really appreciated that. I just loved it. It just spoke to me. It felt very genuine, and I just felt immersed in that world and in that story. And I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I look forward to reading something else by Jason Reynolds in the future. Hopefully All American Boys I'll be able to pick up pretty soon. All right, so after some books about grieving and the plight of the Native Americans in Canada, I needed something a little more upbeat. So I ended up picking up In Real Life by Cory Doctorow and Jen Wang. This is a story about a girl who starts playing an MMORPG. That is a video game that has lots of players online. There's always an economy involved, and teaming up with other players can always get you farther in these games than playing on your own. So there is a social aspect to it as well. I had some issues with this book. It is supposed to address the issue of Chinese farming. Our character runs across another character who is not playing the game for fun. He is playing the game to make whatever currency is in the game, and someone pays him in real life to do this, and then they take that currency from the game and they sell it for real currency to another player. It is something that happens in MMORPGs, but I don't think this book addressed it in a very realistic way. It felt very forced and contrite to me. Also, I had an issue with the way that the idea was presented that girl players never play girl characters. I have not found that to be true whatsoever. I've only come across one female player who played a male character, and that was simply because she stole the character from her ex-boyfriend and he created it as a male instead of a female. So I had a little trouble with that. And also the way the gameplay is presented in here was not realistic at all to me either. I've played 4 or 5 different MMORPGs, and I just felt like nobody did research on this, and it just fell far from reality for me. And I was hoping this would be like a nice little, nostalgic walk through MMORPG play, and instead it just ended up making me mad because it was so unrealistic. So I ended up giving it 2 stars in the end. You can't win them all. All right, and finally I read by Shirley Jackson, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This was kind of an eerie, spooky story. I liked how it unfolded. I liked how you could tell the narrator was not reliable and you had no idea what all was going on. You learn more and more as the story progresses, and at the same time you have more and more questions. And in the end of my probably 7 or 8 questions that I had, probably only 2 of them were answered, and I just kind of was left with what was the point. It just felt like an unfinished work, like maybe it didn't go the direction the author wanted it to, and so she just kind of abandoned it and published it or something. I don't know. This one just didn't work for me either. I gave it 3 stars because it was fun to read, but yeah, not one of my favorites either, and I don't think I'll be picking up any Shirley Jackson in the future. So, not the best month of reading. 1 2-star book, 2 3-star books, a 4-star, and a 5-star. So, not terrible overall, but not fantastic either. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading.